Upon first meeting my sister-in-law, Jennifer, I was struck by her undeniable charm and distinctive features. "Nice to meet you," she greeted me. However, my initial eagerness to connect with her quickly waned as I realized she was referring to an elderly lady who turned out to be my brother's mother-in-law. The atmosphere grew tense as my sister-in-law not only interrupted my greeting, but also labeled me as an old lady. From that moment on, my peaceful days took a turn for the worse. My name is Lisa Betty, a regular 32-year-old housewife. Just 5 years ago, I was a career-driven woman, garnering praise and admiration in the workplace. My husband, Ellery, was part of the professional circle where our paths often crossed. Our friendship began at a party hosted by Ellery's company, where he initiated a conversation with me. Intrigued by the rumors surrounding my reputation, he joined a business meeting with me. Despite initial skepticism, he fell in love with my strong character and way of life. For me, it was reciprocated, as Ellery's striking features and popularity among women had captivated me from the start. Though we maintained a professional distance as business partners, Ellery's persistent pursuit eventually led to numerous dates and, eventually, marriage. Our married life was blissful, marked by smooth days and a routine of morning hugs and warm greetings. Despite our age difference, Ellery's childlike behavior always brought out my maternal instincts. Our relationship was devoid of arguments, with Ellery displaying unwavering kindness even when I accidentally broke cherished items. He cared more about my well-being than material possessions. Our mutual desire for children led me to quit my job, focusing on building a family. In our eyes, any child born of our union was destined to be adorable. As I reflect on the passing time, especially considering the possibility of having a girl, our 3rd anniversary this year arrives without the blessing of a child. Nonetheless, Ellery and I find happiness in our union, except for one aspect: the presence of Ellery's mother and younger sister in his family home. Ellery's father succumbed to cancer before our marriage, leaving behind a cheerful and kind-hearted mother. I believe Ellery's kindness emanates from her. However, his sister is a different story. My unfavorable sentiments toward her trace back to our initial encounter before marriage. Upon our first meeting, I perceived her as charming, much like Ellery, and briefly entertained the notion of getting along. However, that inclination evaporated instantly. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jennifer," I greeted. Instead of reciprocating, she questioned, "Who's this old lady? Is she my brother's wife's mom?" Her interruption chilled the atmosphere, and her subsequent label of old lady intensified the discomfort. With no greeting in return, Ellery stepped in with sarcasm, introducing me as she feigned surprise, asking my age. When I replied with 28, she mockingly expressed disbelief, insinuating that I looked much older. Her audacity left me questioning her relation to Ellery. She continued to scrutinize and make disparaging remarks about my appearance, from my clothes to my weight and unkempt nails. In silence, I observed her until she furrowed her brow, seemingly displeased with either my face or demeanor. She persisted in her snide comments, prompting me to gaze at my own feet. Ellery, trembling with anger, finally snapped, a rarity for him. He confronted her about the extreme rudeness, to which she responded dismissively, labeling him annoying. Her continuous laughter only worsened the situation. This pattern of nasty comments extended not only to me, but also to Ellery and their mother. For years, they had tolerated her behavior without expecting any change. Later, both Ellery and his mother apologized to me, even though they were not at fault. Their apologies left me puzzled, wondering why they felt the need to apologize for her behavior. I sympathized with Ellery's family, but simultaneously, I harbored resentment toward my sister-in-law for directing such hurtful remarks at her own family. To minimize contact, I made the decision to stop visiting Ellery's family home. While I had heard about my sister-in-law through their mother, she hadn't caused us any harm, allowing me to continue living my life peacefully. However, one day an incident disrupted my daily life. Ellery's mother approached us with a request. She planned to move to a senior housing facility with assistance in 6 months and asked if she could stay with us until then. Not surprisingly, she had injured her back, and it was evident that my sister-in-law was to blame. Despite their mother's frail back and difficulty carrying groceries, the sister-in-law, who lived with her, refused to assist and even made her mother carry her shopping bags. The extent of her selfishness inevitably led to the deterioration of their mother's health. I couldn't fathom why the mother didn't simply ask her daughter to leave. Perhaps it was a mother's boundless love, even for a difficult child. While I was willing to live with the mother, the drawback was accepting my sister-in-law as part of the package. It was the last thing I wanted, but my concern for the mother's health left me with no choice but to agree to the sister-in-law moving in as well. As anticipated, living together became a daily struggle. My sister-in-law would spew venom, especially at me. During meal preparations, she'd criticize the taste, calling my cooking trash and questioning my peculiar talent. When folding her clothes, she always found something to complain about, insisting I needed to iron more properly. Her demeanor resembled that of a rebellious teenager. She never mentioned my folding or ironing until she had something negative to say. While cleaning, I had to be meticulous, especially in the corners, or my sister-in-law's sharp-tongued comments would commence, pointing out any perceived flaws. Despite her reluctance to contribute, she was swift to criticize. As I silently wondered when I would escape this ordeal, she added insult to injury, commenting on Ellery's inability to manage household chores and insinuating that having a child was the least I could do, questioning why I was even born a woman. Unable to let such comments slide, I finally spoke up, unable to keep my silence any longer. However, I refrained from uttering another word, or rather, I couldn't. The expression on my sister-in-law's face was horrifying, as if she were disdainfully observing something repulsive. The pressure in the room was so intense that I involuntarily looked down. The atmosphere was daunting and suffocating. A mix of emotions swirled within me, and all I could manage was holding back the tears. Eventually, my sister-in-law left the room, chuckling smugly. On another occasion, my sister-in-law returned home in high spirits. When my mother-in-law inquired about the cause, she eagerly began to boast. Apparently, her boyfriend had proposed, and she proudly described him as tall, handsome, and high-earning. She promptly approached me, seizing the opportunity to bring up my inability to have children. "While I'm on top of the world, losers like you should fulfill their roles as women by having kids," she jeered, adopting her familiar mocking tone. The statement was shocking, and she didn't hesitate to say it in front of Ellery and my mother-in-law. Ellery expressed his anger, but my sister-in-law remained indifferent. Suddenly feeling nauseous and on the verge of tears, I rushed to the bathroom. From behind me, I heard her dismissively utter, "Pathetic." Although her words were hurtful, I was too unwell to care. In the living room, I could hear Ellery and my sister-in-law engaged in a heated argument. My mother-in-law, standing beside me, patted my back and offered words of comfort. "Children are a blessing, and it's up to you and Ellery to decide the pace," she said, tears in her eyes. From the depths of my heart, I wished for my sister-in-law to get married and leave as soon as possible. On another day, after a routine visit to the OBGYN, I decided to take a detour on my way home. There was a popular flower shop nearby, always bustling with activity. Contemplating buying some flowers, I encountered an old colleague, Frank, who called out to me. Although I had left my old job, Frank still looked up to me, and we occasionally chatted about work matters. It had been 4 years since we last met. During our conversation, he shared the news that he was going to marry his girlfriend, with a date already planned for later that day. Curious about Frank's presence at the flower shop, I soon realized the reason. Witnessing Frank talk joyfully about his girlfriend brought a smile to my face. As it was time to go, Frank picked out 2 bouquets, handing one to me as a gift. "This is for you, it's baby's breath. The flower's meaning is gratitude and happiness. I've always been grateful for you, Jennifer. Please continue to be there for me," Frank said, handing me the flowers before heading toward the train station. The notion of choosing flowers based on their meaning was unfamiliar to me, but in that moment I saw Frank as a warm-hearted person. Rushing home, I was eager to share the day's events with my husband. Upon arrival, I found my sister-in-law absent. It seemed she had gone out. Placing the baby's breath in a vase, I joined my mother-in-law in preparing dinner. The atmosphere was peaceful and joyful, a rare occurrence with just the 3 of us. With my sister-in-law away, my mother-in-law enjoyed her favorite TV show that started every day at 8 p.m. That night, I shared the day's happenings with my husband, and we both went to bed with smiles on our faces. The following day, my sister-in-law returned home in the morning, holding a bouquet of roses that she abruptly threw at me. "Put these in a vase," she instructed before retreating to her room. Attempting to comply, I realized most of the flowers were broken or torn, ending up in the trash. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her boyfriend, considering how roughly she had handled the flowers. Later, my sister-in-law, now in her house clothes, informed me that she would be bringing her boyfriend over that Saturday, and emphasized dressing decently. While her words irked me, the thought that my time with her would be brief brought some relief. On the appointed day, Ellery and I were out shopping as requested by my sister-in-law. When we returned, the living room was bustling, and my mother-in-law texted to inform us that my sister-in-law's fiancé had arrived in our absence. Upon greeting them, my sister-in-law glared at me, and an accidental mutual gaze with her fiancé drew disapproval. She instructed me to fetch fresh tea, preventing her fiancé from assisting. When my mother-in-law praised the beautiful roses and baby's breath, my sister-in-law made a snide remark, insisting on separating the flowers or discarding them. She proceeded to drop the baby's breath onto the floor. As I served the refreshed tea and arranged the baby's breath in another vase, my sister-in-law's taunts continued. Annoyed by my silence, she deliberately spilled the tea I had poured, staining the recently cleaned floor. Observing her nervous fidgeting, it was evident that my sister-in-law was agitated. Ellery helped me wipe the floor, but my sister-in-law, oblivious to the tension, insisted that he didn't need to get dirty for me. The atmosphere remained tense, and her fiancé, who had been observing, attempted to defend me with his words. However, my sister-in-law was not willing to accept it. "Why are you defending her? You should only be looking at me," she exclaimed, crossing a point of no return. Her fiancé sought clarification, asking if I was her sister. In response, my sister-in-law uttered her usual demeaning phrase, "Nah, she's just the maid here, so it's okay." Despite my mother-in-law's attempts to silence her, it was, as expected, to no avail. She continued with her usual nasty comments until, satisfied, she looked at her fiancé, who then dropped a bombshell. "Let's break up," he said, leaving Frank livid. It became clear. My sister-in-law was engaged to Frank. The bouquet of roses she had brought home was the same one Frank had purchased just the other day. "Lisa is a senior colleague at my workplace, someone I respect and who's kinder than anyone else. And about that baby's breath flower you said wasn't cute, I sent it to Jennifer." "Sorry for my bad taste," Frank explained, revealing a connection I'd not been aware of. My sister-in-law, who had been gleeful, now began to panic. Frank continued, coldly stating that just because she didn't know about their professional connection, she couldn't mock him. My husband stood by my side glaring at my sister-in-law, while my mother-in-law looked down, clearly disappointed. Everyone in the room shared that sentiment. Witnessing the disappointment, my sister-in-law looked at me with wide eyes, begging for support. However, I firmly shook off her hand. "I've always put up with your snide remarks. After all you've done, don't come to me for help now," I declared, laying bare my emotions toward her. As my sister-in-law attempted to slap me, Ellery stepped in, grabbing her hand. Ellery, who had been silent until now, poured a cup of tea over my sister-in-law's head in anger. He then shouted at her, revealing the truth about our struggles to conceive. It wasn't me who couldn't have children. It was Ellery himself. After diligent treatment, his male infertility was cured, and now I was carrying our baby. Furious at my sister-in-law's comment, Ellery demanded an immediate apology. Seeing your brother genuinely angry for the first time, my sister-in-law was so startled that she fell on her butt. However, instead of siding with her, my mother-in-law shrugged her off, declaring, "I'm done with you. I've let a lot slide because you're my daughter, but I've reached my limit. Leave this house now. You're the worst daughter, you ungrateful brat." Feeling abandoned by even her mother, my sister-in-law ran to her room crying. Frank mentioned that he would contact us later and left the house. My mother-in-law hugged me, expressing admiration for enduring so much. Learning for the first time that I was pregnant, she cried with a smile, saying, "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Congratulations." Ellery apologized for not protecting me properly, and despite the tumultuous few minutes, I felt refreshed having finally expressed my feelings to my sister-in-law. The story continued with my mother-in-law, moving to a senior living community, the family home being sold, and Ellery and me deciding to move closer to my mother-in-law, wanting her to witness our child's growth. Since that incident, there has been no word about my sister-in-law. Ellery forcibly escorted his reclusive sister out of the room, tossing her belongings out of the house. No one has been in touch with her since, leaving everyone in the dark about her whereabouts and activities. Unexpectedly, I received a text message from Frank, informing me that he had sent a letter and some flowers. A bouquet of baby's breath had just arrived in the mail. Placing the flowers in a vase, I began to read the letter. "Jennifer, I'm so sorry for my late response. How have you been feeling? Congratulations on your pregnancy. It was such unexpected happy news that it even made me happy." The letter delved into Frank's relationship with my sister-in-law after the incident. It revealed that they had met once since, as it came to light that she had been two-timing. Frank found out when the other man she was seeing contacted him. Since then, he cut ties, and they are no longer in touch. The letter expressed Frank's gratitude, acknowledging that he should be the one thanking me. Despite the circumstances, he wished for Frank's sincere happiness. The unexpected turn of events regarding my sister-in-law, who had relentlessly bullied me, made me realize the profound truth that one's actions, whether good or bad, eventually come back to oneself based on how one treats others. Through these experiences, I hope to instill in my child a sense of compassion and understanding.